Hello everyone, my name is Mohammed Ali. Our presentation will be about introduction to the Linux. As a first, what is the Linux operating system? What is the Linux kernel? Architecture of the Linux operating system, advantage and disadvantage of the Linux operating system, different of Linux and other operating system. As a first, what is the Linux operating system? Here we have 10 points. It's very important to understanding the Linux operating system. As a first, Linux is an open source operating system. We mean by it, the code is available for anyone, and the operating system is a software that directly manage the system hardware and the resource like CPU, memory, and storage, based on the Linux kernel. The second point, the operating system is side between application and hardware and makes a connection between all of our software and physical resource that can do the work of the operating system. Like we see here, the operating system is site here. It was initialized by Linus Torvalds on September 17, 1991. The command line is our direct access to the computer, and it's where we ask the software to perform a hardware action that when clearly click a graphical user interface cannot work simply. Like we see here, the command line is our interface where we can asking the operating system anything or doing any task. Also, the 5 point is free and open source operating system. It's not like another operating system, it's completely free, and the source code of the Linux can be modified and distributed on to anyone communicably and non-communicably. We mean the source code can we can modify the source code of the operating system by anyone. The 6 point, Linux are embedded system nowadays, and it's used in router automation, control television, digital video record, video game control, and smartwatch. The biggest success of the Linux was Android, where it's based in the Linux kernel that is turning in smartphone and tablet. The 8 point, Android Linux, the largest install based on the general purpose of the operating system. 9 point, Linux is generally packaged in the Linux distribution. And 10 point, what we mean by Linux distribution. Linux distribution is operating system that is made up of the software based on the Linux kernel IO. We can say the distribution contain the Linux kernel and supporting the library of the software. Like we see here we have Fedora, Debian. Also we have so many distribution of this the Linux software. What we mean by the Linux kernel. Linux kernel is the core part of the operating system, like we see here, and it's established communication between the device and the software, and also it's managed system resource and have four responsibility. The first one is device management, where it's connected with all the device and then manage it. Memory management is management the memory also. Three, process management is management the process, which one have to work and how. For responsibility is handling system call, where the program can ask the kernel anything to performance it. Architecture of the Linux. Here we have the level like we see in the photo. The architecture of the Linux. In the first one layer we have application, second one is shell, third one is the kernel, and in the core of and the fourth one is hardware. We mean by hardware all the hardware device like CPU, RAM, and IO. The kernel is like we say is the core of the operating system, and it's visualize our hardware, all hardware device for each processor. We shall its interface to the kernel, which hits the completely of the kernel, the complexity of the kernel function from the user, and its task command from the user and execute the kernel function. Also, we have application layer. We mean by it the programs that we use. Also, here we have system utility, where it provides the functional of the operating system to the user. Here, different of the Linux and another operating system. For example, we will make compare between the Linux operating system and the Windows. As the first, Linux is open source operating system, where Windows it isn't open source. Linux is a free and completely it's free. We can use it for free, but when Windows is costly. Here in Linux the file name is case sensitive, while in the Windows it isn't case sensitive. The Linux is more efficient in use, where the Windows is less efficient. Linux provide more security than the Windows, while the Windows is provide less security. Linux is widely used in the hacking purpose-based system, while Windows doesn't provide much efficiency in hacking. Advantage and disadvantage of the Linux operating system. Here we have some advantage, like high security, stable, free and open source, where it's open source and free completely. We absolutely freedom over our operating system, where we can change and modify the source code. It's have high performance, and also we can easily install the software. Install the software, which is very widely exist on the internet. Is better software update, because it's open source and have update in the short time. The disadvantage of it, it's not standard edition, haven't a standard edition, because it's open source. Also, it's a little bit hard to learn curve, limit mark share, also lack of property software, where many programs aren't work on the Linux operating system. Also, it's difficult to troubleshoot and fix the error. Thank you for listening.